scale on bad data. If marketers don't learn to be data stewards and system thinkers, no amount of AI or automation will save them. That's a quote from Kim Tran and a sneak peek at today's episode. Welcome to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast, the show where growth-minded business leaders learn how to turn marketing into a measurable revenue engine. I'm your host, Kerry Curran, revenue growth obsessed, go-to-market expert, and industry analyst. Each week, I sit down with the brightest minds in marketing, sales, and customer success to unpack the real-world strategies that drive sustainable growth. If you like what you hear, please be sure to follow, rate, and review the podcast on your favorite platform. It helps us reach more leaders like you. In today's episode, turning data chaos into clarity, how smart marketers turn metrics into go-to-market momentum, I'm joined by Kim Tran. She's the head of marketing and business development at Gimmal. Together, we take a deep dive into one of the most critical and overlooked challenges in modern B2B marketing: dirty, disjointed, and disconnected data. Kim shares her firsthand experience navigating data chaos, aligning stakeholders, and building the systems and skills needed to transform flawed inputs into strategic growth. Stay tuned until the end of today's episode to hear how Kim recommends building your data literacy and AI readiness one tech stack at a time. Let's go. So welcome, Kim. Please introduce yourself and share your background and expertise.
Hi, Kerry. Thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. My name is Kim Tran. I am currently the head of marketing and business development with Gimmal. We are a B2B SaaS software company in the data and information governance space.
Excellent. Well, Kim, so excited to have you. This is actually your second time on the show. And last time you did a great episode on change management and how important that is for marketers. So we'll make sure to include that in the show notes because I know I learned a lot from that as well. We're very excited to have you back. And so today we're going to talk a lot about kind of data and data governance and kind of what you're seeing. And so just starting with, marketers today, we have so much access to so much data. And it can be overwhelming of what, we want to use it to get smarter, but it's invest more strategically, but what do we use and how do we use it and how do we know what to use it? So just talk about kind of what you're seeing from that perspective.
Yeah. So just a bit of background. I have focused most of my career in the past decade, both in just traditional tech and software, but also highly regulated industries. And so most recently in ed tech, but also financial services. And so when you say that we were drowning in data, we had a lot of data, but we also dealt with a lot of sensitive data as well. And so consumer information and just a lot of various sources of data. The other piece too about regulated industries is that typically a lot of this data is housed in silos. So various technologies, various teams who may or may not be owning that data or even have access to that data. And so I think one of the most common challenges is even who is responsible for that data and how can I access that? A lot of times, if you are in a smaller company, you may or may not just the owner of that data or marketing data is you and maybe one other person or maybe an agency. When I was with a Fortune 500 company, top bank financial services, there were a lot of data cooks in the kitchen. And we had to go through a lot of various layers, both within the business unit as well as the enterprise level. And so depending on your organization and your structure, I think one of the challenge that marketers can overcome is really to embody this essence of being a good data steward and being curious about data. I think that the age of marketers being just, just a brand marketer or just creative or whatever
Hmm.
stereotypical marketing image we had in the past is over. Now, especially in the age of AI, we need to be discerning. We are at an age, a very critical inflection point. It's not just human created data that we're going to be dealing with now, but also
Hmm.
synthetic and AI generated data as well. And
Hmm.
so I spoke about this in my previous episode, but another challenge that marketers will be dealing with is really thinking through workflows,
Yeah.
as well as systems thinking. And
Hmm.
so, data, when you think about data, you really need to think about data and how it connects to other teams,
Yeah.
other contexts. And I think that's a huge misconception and challenge when marketing deals with data, is that you see a metric and you make a knee-jerk reaction or decision based on just that set of
Hmm.
data when that context is missing.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's such an important aspect of it, is making sure you're looking at it in the right context and aligning it with the other data points. So, talk about kind of for the marketing leaders that are just beginning to think strategically about data and strategies, what are some of the first steps that they need to really establish that solid foundation?
I love this question because I think as marketers, we tend to go into execution mode really
Hmm.
quickly. We're looking
Hmm.
for the quick wins.
Yeah.
We have pressures coming in from all sides and all levels, right?
Yeah.
And we sometimes get tunnel visioned into a short termism type of
Hmm.
mindset or execution mode. Um, Data strategy is really a long term play because everything will be built on that foundation. Your
Hmm.
automation workflows, your cadences, personalization, data cleanup will be huge, especially
Hmm.
with data privacy laws across various states, and not to mention globally. We
Right.
do business in the EU and in the UK, and they have much more stringent privacy laws than the US. And so it's a catch 22 for marketers. You're expected to leverage data for business growth, but you're also really need to be compliant
Hmm.
and be a good data steward. And
Yeah.
so, a couple of kind of quick wins that marketers can do, especially if you work on a small team and many of us don't have that technical background,
Hmm.
is learn.
Yeah.
It sounds a little cliche, but learning how to learn again
Hmm.
is a muscle that I think marketers are best positioned to do because marketing is constantly changing,
Hmm.
but it can be very scary because most of our time is spent, being creative or big picture strategy, but learning how to be technical. And I am a hands-on learner, and so I will go into, the marketing automation tools or Salesforce. Salesforce is, kind of the CRM
Yeah.
king here or queen, but I am terrible at Salesforce. And so, just seeking out ways for you to learn so you can get really intimate with that data so that
Hmm.
you can understand how you want to then build your foundation and strategies on that foundation. Otherwise, you cannot scale on bad data. Last year, throughout the last year, we've seen a lot of change, for example,
Hmm.
in geopolitical climate and privacy laws, regulations, etc. My team has spent a lot of time behind the scenes working with our ops team or IT team to revamp our tech stack, but also to learn together
Hmm.
so that we can keep our data clean. And it's not so much about the quantity of leads that come in, but really that quality. And so moving forward, I think this will be even more urgent
Hmm.
and a non-negotiable skills for marketers because, as mentioned, you're not only now dealing with human created data, but AI, synthetic data, and maybe AI agents, right? And so building that foundation will be critical.
Hmm.
And part of building that foundation is learning and doing together as your team, especially if you're a small team and don't have, kind of the big agency resources or consultants to do the work for you.
Hmm. Yeah, and that can be a challenge too for marketers that maybe come from a creative background or just, grew up in a time where it was less, we have access to less data and it's getting harder to kind of get up to speed. So how do you kind of talk about, or what are the misconceptions you're seeing that you're kind of educating people on when it comes to the importance of data if it's not something that's as familiar to them?
Yeah, I think if something is not familiar to you, there's a lot of FOBO going on,
Mhm.
fear of becoming obsolete.
Yep.
So I started off my career in the B2B tech SaaS space exactly 11 years ago. And marketing automation was just coming on
Mhm.
to kind of the mass mainstream or
Yep.
mass awareness. And the same issues that I'm seeing with AI now is marketing automation related.
Yep.
And if marketing teams do not have their workflows and systems in place, you
Mhm.
cannot scale. And
Yep.
so with AI, if you are building a workflow or system that used to work for you, based on data or information that was, a year or 2 years ago and completely outdated, that will generate inaccurate information,
Mhm.
untrustworthy
Mhm.
information. The other piece about AI is I've seen some jokes and memes around AI being an overconfident intern because
Mhm.
there have been instances of hallucinations with AI
Yep.
where it'll
Mhm.
just spit out answers and it'll just sound so factual and confident, but then you dig into things a little bit and completely inaccurate and wrong. And
Mhm.
so for me, that those building blocks for marketers is so key, and that systems thinking and reverse engineering, what do you want to achieve
Mhm.
rather than what do you need to focus on right away, and jumping into things and really think about holistically as well as contextually what you want to achieve, whether it's more revenue. Everybody loves making more money, right? But is it saving money? Is it governance? Is it compliance?
Mhm.
And really working back from that to build out the right workflows and systems.
Yeah, and I think it's so important, as you said, to really think critically about the data, and make sure that it is accurate. And it's yeah, I had a similar experience where I was using AI to get insights from some content, and then I went and said, "Tell me more about insert name of something it had already told me," and it said I don't know. Sorry, I don't know where you found that. Like it basically admitted that I don't know where it put, because I was like using this source. Tell me about this. Tell me more about this. They're like,
Yeah.
it's not there in the source. So I'm like, what? So, but then I had to go back and double check everything that I'd pulled. So to your point, like we can't just accept it blindly. But I liked when you talked about kind of the metrics lining up to kind of the business goals. So talk about kind of
Yeah.
using the language of the stakeholders and leaders to identify those metrics, and how do you kind of standardize it across the stakeholders?
Yeah, I love this question because I am constantly improving on how I talk to various stakeholders as well, talk to my own leadership, talk to my team. Everybody is motivated by different
Mhm.
things, and they don't always, I think marketing can sometimes slip into buzzword happy
Yep.
mode.
Mhm.
Not everybody knows what a MQL is or how it's calculated,
Yep.
and depending on your stakeholder or your C-suite executive, they're not going to care. Period.
Yep.
So thinking through what do they care about and having those conversations, it kind of goes back to that theme of learning how to learn.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I always have conversations, or at least try to have conversations around what matters most to you. Is it
Mhm.
pipeline? Is it the quality of leads? At one point in my career, all I was responsible for was the number of leads.
Mhm.
And this was at a much bigger enterprise company. And so my scope was, of course, much more siloed, and that was okay. But currently, I'm in a much smaller environment. We move fast. I don't necessarily like the term fail fast, but I like the term fail safely,
Mm-hmm.
so that and fail strategically so that you can learn from those mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for me, I think, speaking the same language and laddering the metrics up to what your stakeholders and your leadership cares about that will move the needle is so
Mm-hmm.
important. So, one kind of case story of my career here, I had joined the company at a time of a lot of change. We had grown through various acquisitions in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
And as you can imagine, inherited legacy data in Salesforce. And to put it blankly and very honestly, Salesforce was a cesspool.
Yep.
And we spent a lot of time cleaning out pipeline because my leadership said, hey, the number of leads is important. We all always want volume, but something's not right. The MQL rates are
Yep.
looking fabulous. The pipeline seems a little inflated. But what else are we doing wrong?
Yep.
And I had to put on my quote unquote engineering hat and really look at the full funnel. I know that we've talked about this in the previous episode, so I won't go too deep into things, but it came back to looking at the data, but and then looking at the right metrics. And
Yep.
so one thing that I encourage marketers to and especially marketing leaders specifically, because you are speaking on behalf of your team,
Mm-hmm.
is kind of being a chaos pilot. We are in the age of data and information chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And just like a pilot, you want to get everybody flying in the same direction, whether you're
Mm-hmm.
flying fast, whether you're getting rerouted, whatever it is. But you have one destination.
Yep.
You have a plan to get to that destination. And you may have layovers, whether it's whatever metrics that you want to focus on, but really align on those metrics. And I did that exercise with my leadership just about 2 years ago. So we
Mm-hmm.
cleaned up the pipeline. I and while I still focus on things like MQL rates, SAL rates, we now look at pipeline to see the health of that
Mm-hmm.
pipeline and to really understand conversion rates down funnel and see, are these the right leads for us to have
Mm-hmm.
if the pipeline is not laddering up
Yep.
to the number, the shining holy grail number that we're aiming for.
Hey everyone, it's me, Kerry Curran. If you're a B2B company that sells to marketers, whether you're an agency, MarTech, or AdTech, and your revenue is either flattening, declining, or just not growing fast enough, I can help. I've spent my entire career selling, marketing, and servicing marketers, so I know firsthand the challenges they face, the buying decisions they make, and what actually moves the needle. The truth is, most marketing strategies aren't built for revenue growth, but mine are. As your fractional chief growth officer, I'll bring revenue-focused marketing strategies designed specifically for selling to marketers, deep expertise in agency, MarTech, and AdTech buying behaviors, modern go-to-market strategies that include everything from brand awareness to driving loyalty and retention, and a track record of doubling and even tripling revenue for B2B companies just like yours. So if you're tired of your stagnant results and you're ready to build a marketing engine that actually drives revenue, let's talk. Visit revenuebasedmarketing.com or connect with me on LinkedIn to schedule a consultation. Together, let's build a smarter, more profitable path forward. RBMA, Revenue-Based Marketing Advisors, we're revenue-based marketing that works. Yeah, no, I love that. And it's, I think that's a challenge that a lot of organizations face, whether you're like going through a merger or, just have a legacy CRM that hasn't been audited or reviewed in a long time. And so it's to your point. Yeah, it's you if it's not, you're not, it gives you, the data gives you the opportunity to identify where the problems are. but it's taking the time to make sure that going back to what you said at the beginning, the workflow and the data is connecting the points and helping you identify how to get smarter towards that golden goal. And that ties to something you'd mentioned to me once before of a couple of things when it comes to your analysis of the either cognitive biases or
Yep.
just directional versus conclusive trends. So talk a bit about kind of the analysis and how we have to kind of the different lenses we need to make sure we're having when we look at the data.
Yeah, I love nerding out about this. So rein me back if you need to. But I majored in psychology in undergrad. And I think because of that, the way that I think when it comes to marketing is very hypothesis driven.
Mm-hmm.
And so depending on our goals, of course, we will then, have a test and experimentation. And I know that good marketers will
Mm-hmm.
always be testing,
Yeah.
and always be learning,
Mm-hmm.
is another kind of cliche that I like to tell my team. But there is also a lot of cognitive biases that go into testing and experimenting. I
Yeah.
think, especially as marketers, again, I mentioned we all feel the pressure. We all feel the pressure of having almost to prove our existence or justify our spend or, report on our ROI. And sometimes we tend to slip into very human behavior,
Mm-hmm.
where we may be afraid to report on bad news, for
Yeah.
example. Last year, paid ads and paid search performance abysmal. And that was not just for our company or our team, but just industry wise,
Mm-hmm.
with AI search and AI content coming on board. And so that bad news needed to be communicated, and that pivoting and
Mm-hmm.
explaining why we are turning off paid ads temporarily, is something that we had to explain. And so when I talk about cognitive fears and biases, I think there's a lot of that going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the great thing about data is the data is the data. And
Mm-hmm.
so when someone gets fearful or someone gets a little emotional around, what's happening, or why are we not hitting goal, or why are we not tracking towards a pipeline, truing it back to the data and really talking about it in a very objective
Mm-hmm.
manner rather than someone's subjective emotions or opinions
Yeah.
will always be key. And of course, that goes back to good data and
Mm-hmm.
trustworthy data.
Yeah.
Um, the other thing that I'm seeing a trend on LinkedIn and just the marketing world in general are these blanket statements of things like SEO is dead,
Yeah.
or, events don't work. True
Mm-hmm.
story, by the way, but I won't go into that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, what do you mean by that? That's
Right.
definitely
Right.
a cognitive bias. Maybe you did not do events in a way that is conducive to, good conversations or
Yeah.
good conversions.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe webinars have worked at some point, the way you did it, but now we have to shift webinar strategy to accommodate, webinar fatigue, right? Like
Yeah.
COVID, everybody was virtual, everybody was, online,
Mm-hmm.
but people are now seeking in-person connections,
Yeah.
and moments. And how do we pivot? And so those types of cognitive biases will start coming out in conversations from marketers. The other piece, too, that we are seeing, and especially in highly regulated industries where your data or information might be housed in legacy infrastructures or legacy technology, is
Mm-hmm.
missing information completely,
Yeah.
right? And so there is a term called survivorship bias, where you make decisions on data or information that you have, but you don't consider the missing information or the missing data that might transform the insight
Yeah.
completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so one example of this was a couple of companies ago now. We were in a meeting, probably 30 plus people. And the challenge was, and the issue was, we were spending around 3 times the acquisition costs at the top funnel. And the quote unquote challenge was, we have a top funnel issue. why are people, not coming into the funnel? We need more leads. We need
Mhm.
to spend more acquisitions or cut acquisitions, something like that.
Yep.
And I just had this pressing question where I was like, I feel like there's something missing from the conversation here. Um, and I was maybe 2 months in. I had so much fear within myself. I was brand new to the company, I was brand new to
Mhm.
the industry. And I said, yes, we're spending 3 times the amount on acquisitions, but why is retention triple the rate?
Yep.
What's happening there?
Mhm.
And my boss at the time, phenomenal leader, she really amplified my question and said, can we get back to this? I think that something is missing. Let's dig into this. And all of our very smart data business analyst folks put their heads together, crunched the numbers, and we found out that we were spending 3 times the acquisition costs because at the lower funnel we were acquiring leads who were gaming the system.
Oh,
So
got
they
it.
were taking
Mhm.
advantage of limited time offers, and then when those offers expired, they would then just leave the company, or leave our
Mhm.
solution completely. And so
Yep.
that completely pivoted and transformed our strategy rather than just solely focus on acquisitions.
Yeah, no, that is such a helpful and informative story to think about because, and I was thinking about even when you were saying earlier when people are saying events don't work or SEO doesn't work or paid search, or in that scenario, if the upper funnel costs too much, I think what we also don't think about or see marketers not stop and think about enough is, are we applying the right KPIs to it? And I
Yep.
know that comes up a lot with SEO. SEO is your introduction and engagement. So are people coming in organically and immediately filling out a form and then, or like immediately accessing your demo? Probably not. Are
Yep.
they going to go to an event and register to be a customer like at the event or within a month? Like it depends on what you're selling. But again, if you're considered purchase, probably not. It's a more of an upper funnel. So it's a lot of it, I had a former not so bright boss saying, "I'll give you B2B marketing budget. I'll give you budget, but you need to show return right away." And I was like, "Well, that's not how marketing works. That's not how, especially B2B marketing. So you have to think about the KPIs of the investment that you're making. What does return mean? And to your point, like you might to you SEO, if you apply the wrong KPI, SEO might look dead. Or to your point, that the upper funnel, could have been that they weren't, they were high, but it was relative. So I just love your examples and how we need to think about the data and how we're using it to get
Yeah.
smarter.
Yeah, and the reality is a lot of teams and companies are expected to do more with less at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And so
Hmm.
one of the challenges I think for marketers, and which shines the light even more so on good data, is
Hmm.
based on your objectives and have 3 priorities.
Yeah.
Anything more is not a priority.
Right.
And
Yep.
and then look at the priorities and then look at your data and insights, not in a tunnel vision way. I think that sometimes because of all the pressures, we tend to look at answering or lining up the data to answer what we want to
Right.
achieve,
Right.
rather than just look at the data in a very objective manner to
Hmm.
start seeing patterns or insights
Yep.
that we have not thought about before. And I
Hmm.
think that, all the data cleanup, all of that, and the building blocks to that strong foundation leading into AI, this is where the magic happens with
Yeah.
AI, because
Yeah.
AI, we cannot humanly keep up at the speed and scale that AI will ingest data and interpret data. But we
Hmm.
can go in and build out the quality of that data to begin with and
Hmm.
put in the parameters, put in the systems in place so that we can train AI to help us be more strategic or insightful.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. Ken, thank you so much. So, before I let you go, for the people who are listening and are thinking, I need to get smarter about my data. Like, what are some of the foundational, like basic, either literacy skills or, information they should think about to get more out of their data?
Yeah. So currently, I'll share kind of where my team on our journey, on our co learning journey is. So we are sometimes, this is another kind of huge challenge with marketers. A lot of times you will inherit your
Mm-hmm.
tech stack. We all have our own personal preferences, whether it's just better UI or UX or whatever it is. But oftentimes, we inherit technologies that we are not in love with. And so making it a team to learn directly via the vendor
Mm-hmm.
or going on LinkedIn. I've learned so much from just having conversations on
Yep.
LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
But also Data Camp as well as General Assembly have been
Yep.
two companies that I personally use. I love the content that they also put out there. And then just as a non-technical leader in the age of AI, I am naturally a tinkerer, but research has shown that just like tech, there is a gender gap in AI. And so, women in AI, I follow them on LinkedIn. I've checked out their resources. They are a community that builds and learns together. And
Mm-hmm.
so, that theme of learning together is really important for me because it is scary. It is scary to not know what you don't know or to be a
Yep.
beginner again.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I can, if it's okay for me to share a personal
Yep.
story, my daughter is learning Mandarin at the moment on the
Amazing.
weekends, and I started to join her on her Sunday afternoons learning Mandarin. And one thing that really stood out to me as an adult learning versus a child learning is,
Mm-hmm.
my daughter gets rewarded for participating. She gets rewarded for asking questions. If she doesn't know something, her teachers are like, "Oh, it's okay. Let's learn together." And that made me realize that as an adult, I think if we know that other people are learning, to be more graceful,
Mm-hmm.
and also just as personally, we need to also realize that I think we're all learning together,
Yep.
and
Yeah.
sharing that burden or fun or
Mm-hmm.
challenge of learning together makes it a little less scary. And so for me, data literacy skills, I know that folks are, and especially in the EU, who now requires AI literacy under the new AI Act requirements.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but again, data literacy needs to come before AI literacy.
Yep.
And even just breaking it out into chunks, tech stacks that you are currently learning, that you're currently using. Salesforce, I mentioned. I love Salesforce, but I also hate it. And that love hate relationship, I just have to get over that psychological barrier and just get into it and pull the reports myself, dig into the data myself. It's not sexy work, but it's needed work.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that you do that work yourself, you will build that confidence and know how so that you can then go on to bigger, data initiatives and bigger data projects and also talk strategically about that data and communicate that data to your leadership.
Excellent. Thank you, Kim. This has been so, so informative. As always, please, how can people find you to follow you and learn more?
Yeah, so people can reach out to Gimmal.com if they are looking for data or information governance solutions. But if they want to reach out to myself, I am on a mission to share my own data literacy journey with folks. And so you can find me on LinkedIn at Kim Tran, Gimmal. And I am always open to virtual coffee chats as well. I am out in the broader DC metro area. And so for me, it's very important to just stay connected and learn together and grow together.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Kim. Great to have you on again, and hopefully we'll have you here again soon. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Kerry.
Thanks for listening to Revenue Boost, a marketing podcast. If this episode gave you new ways to think about data, alignment, or building smarter marketing systems, Share it with a teammate who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. It helps other revenue leaders like you find us. And if you're looking to build a better go-to-market strategy rooted in real metrics and real results, visit revenuebasedmarketing.com. Until next time, align your data, learn together, and scale with purpose.